A summer of forgotten stars. Life used to be very quiet here, but everything changed that day. The kind of quiet where you could hear the bees buzzing in the clover fields and the gentle rustle of leaves in the old oak trees. My city life was a different kind of loud, full of car horns and sirens, but this quiet felt different, like a soft blanket. If this story sparks wonder in your heart, do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button, give this video a big thumbs up, share it with your friends, and leave a comment telling me what you think. Your support means the world to me. My grandma lived in a tiny cottage that smelled like dried herbs and wood smoke. It was surrounded by fields that stretched out like a green sea under the bright summer sun. I was Sam, and I was 10 years old, and this summer I was staying with Grandma. I loved stars. Back home, I'd press my face against my bedroom window, tracing the patterns of constellations I knew from books. The city had its own glow, a hazy orange that blurred the edges of the sky, but even through that, I could usually find the Big Dipper and the North Star. But here, it was different. The sky was bigger, a vast canvas of blue that felt endless. The sun was incredibly bright, making everything so clear and sharp. Yet, when night came and the stars began to peek out, I felt a pang of disappointment. They looked dull, like tiny, faded sparks. The brilliant ones I remembered from my city sky seemed to be missing altogether. Where was the shimmering belt of Orion and the great, proud star in the lion's head, Regulus? They were barely there, if at all. It was like someone had turned down the dimmer switch on the whole night sky. I remember sitting on Grandma's porch swing, the wood creaking a soft rhythm, my eyes scanning the heavens. "Grandma," I asked, my voice a little small, "why don't the stars shine as bright here as they do in the city?" Grandma, who was knitting a colorful scarf that seemed to have no end, paused. She set down her needles and looked up at the sky, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "Oh, Sam," she said, her voice like warm honey. "It's not that the stars themselves have changed. It's us." I tilted my head, confused. "Us? What do you mean?" She chuckled, a soft, rustling sound. "Well, the people in the cities, they're so busy looking down, aren't they? At their phones, at their screens, at the pavement. They've forgotten how to look up. And when people forget to look, Sam, the stars, well, they feel forgotten too. They fade." Forgotten stars. The idea settled in my young mind, a strange and powerful thought. It explained the faintness, the missing sparkle. It wasn't the stars' fault. It was ours. And then, a new feeling bloomed in my chest, warm and insistent, like a seed pushing through the earth. I decided, right then and there, that this summer wouldn't just be about quiet days and Grandma's delicious apple pies. This summer, I was going to bring back the forgotten stars. My goal sounded huge, almost impossible. How could a 10-year-old boy bring back stars? It wasn't like I could polish them or sprinkle them with stardust. Grandma had said it was about people forgetting how to look, so my mission had to be about reminding them. I needed to make people stop and look up. The next few days were filled with a new kind of energy for me. I started small, as Grandma had always taught me. My first idea was to organize a stargazing picnic. It seemed simple enough. I asked Grandma if we could have a picnic one evening, but not a regular one. It had to be after the sun had completely set, when the sky was at its darkest. Grandma, bless her, was always so supportive of my ideas, even the peculiar ones. She helped me pack a basket with her famous cheese sandwiches, some lemonade, and a big blanket. I also grabbed my trusty star chart, a well-worn book with drawings of constellations and stories about them. That evening, as the sky deepened from twilight blue to inky black, we spread the blanket in the meadow behind the cottage. The air was warm and smelled of sweet grass and wild flowers. A few neighbors, Mrs. Gable from next door with her friendly dog, Buster, and old Mr. Henderson, who always had a twinkle in his eye, wandered over. They'd seen me setting up and were curious. "What's all this, Sam?" Mrs. Gable asked, her voice kind. "It's a stargazing picnic," I announced, trying to sound confident. "We're going to look at the stars." Mr. Henderson peered up. "Stars, eh? Don't see many of them these days, or at least, not the bright ones." He'd heard Grandma's whispers, I suppose. This was my chance. I opened my star chart. "Well," I began, my voice a little shaky at first, then growing stronger as I spoke, "tonight, we're going to try and find them. Grandma says people have forgotten how to look, and that makes the stars fade." I pointed to a faint cluster. "See this group here? This is supposed to be the Great Bear, Ursa Major, and look, there's the Big Dipper. It's not as bright as I know it can be, but it's there. And its handle is pointing towards Polaris, the North Star." I explained that the stories say the Big Dipper is a celestial plow used by ancient farmers to guide their crops. Mr. Henderson nodded, his eyes twinkling more than usual. Mrs. Gable's dog, Buster, lay down with a sigh, seemingly content just to be part of the quiet gathering. As I talked, I noticed something. The neighbors weren't looking at their phones. They were looking up. They were squinting, pointing, and asking questions. "Is that it, Sam? I think I see it." Then I told them a story about Cassiopeia, the queen sitting on her throne. I described how her shape, even though it was faint tonight, was a sign of royalty in the sky. I spoke of Andromeda, the princess chained to a rock, waiting for her hero. The more I spoke, the more their heads tilted back. The air grew heavy with a comfortable silence, punctuated only by my voice and the chirping of crickets. It felt different from a city night. The darkness here was deeper, more complete, and that made the faint starlight stand out even more, as if the sky itself was whispering secrets. As the moon rose, casting a soft, silver glow, the stars seemed to gather a little more courage. They weren't as bright as I'd dreamed, but they were definitely there, winking shyly. And for the first time that summer, I saw a little spark of wonder ignite in the eyes of my neighbors. They weren't just looking at the sky, they were seeing it. "You know, Sam," Mr. Henderson said later, as we packed up the picnic basket, "I haven't looked at the stars like this in years. Used to do it with my own dad when I was a boy." Mrs. Gable added, "It's a shame, isn't it? All this beauty, and we just walk right past it, or drive past it with our headlights on." Her words struck a chord. Headlights, streetlights, the constant, bright, artificial light of modern life. Grandma had mentioned the city being too bright. Maybe that was another reason the stars seemed forgotten. The light pollution. The next day, I had a new mission. Convince people to turn off their lights. This felt even harder than the stargazing picnic. It was asking people to change their habits, to embrace the darkness. I started with Grandma. "Grandma, what if everyone in the village turned off their outdoor lights for just an hour one night? What if we made it a dark sky hour?" She smiled, her eyes twinkling. "A noble idea, Sam, but how will you convince them?" Quote. I thought hard. "I can talk to them. I can explain why it's important. And maybe if they see how much brighter the stars get, they'll want to do it more often." So I started my campaign. I went from house to house, my star chart tucked under my arm, my voice filled with earnest conviction. I explained about light pollution, about how our bright lights were washing out the faint glow of distant stars. I told them the stories again, making them sound even more magical. I painted a picture of a sky so clear you could see the Milky Way stretching like a river of diamonds. Some people were intrigued. Mrs. Gable readily agreed. Mr. Henderson said he'd be happy to join. But others were hesitant. "Turn off my lights? What if someone tries to break in?" asked Mr. Peterson, who owned the general store. "We'll all be looking out for each other," I said, trying to sound reassuring. "And Grandma will be right there with me." I explained that the stars weren't just pretty lights. They were ancient guides, storytellers, and a connection to something vast and beautiful. I talked about how the stars had been used for navigation by sailors and explorers for centuries. I told them that when we let the darkness return, we let those stories come back to life. Slowly, a few more people agreed. It was a small group at first. Grandma, Mrs. Gable, Mr. Henderson, and a few other families who lived on the outskirts of the village. The idea of a dark sky hour was gaining a little traction, like a small snowball rolling down a hill. The chosen night arrived. It was a clear, moonless evening, a perfect canvas for stars. We gathered again in the meadow, this time with more people. The village lights, usually a soft glow on the horizon, seemed a little dimmer tonight. People had turned off some of their porch lights and garden lamps. As the designated hour began, a hush fell over the gathering. One by one, the remaining lights in the houses closest to the meadow blinked out. It was a strange, almost eerie feeling at first. The darkness deepened, and my heart beat a little faster. And then it happened. It wasn't a sudden explosion of light. It was more like a gentle awakening. The stars, which had been shy and faint just days before, seemed to be taking a deep, collective breath and shining a little brighter. More stars appeared. Then more. The familiar patterns, the Big Dipper and Cassiopeia, stood out with a clarity I hadn't seen since I'd arrived. And then I pointed. "Look!" I whispered, my voice filled with awe. "Look up there!" A collective gasp went through the crowd. Spreading across the vast expanse of the night sky was a luminous band, a milky, ethereal glow. The Milky Way. I had never seen it before, not really. Back in the city, it was just a faint smudge, if anything. Here, it was a breathtaking spectacle, a cosmic river flowing through the darkness. People were pointing, whispering, their faces turned upwards, illuminated by the faint starlight. Mr. Henderson had a look of pure astonishment. Mrs. Gable had tears in her eyes. Even Mr. Peterson, who had been so hesitant, was staring, his mouth slightly open. I've never seen anything like it," he murmured. Grandma smiled at me, her eyes full of pride. "You see, Sam? When we give the stars a chance, they remember how to shine." That night, something shifted in our little village. The dark sky hour became a regular thing. People started turning off their lights not just for an hour, but for longer stretches. They discovered that the darkness wasn't something to be feared, but something that held its own quiet beauty. I continued my efforts. I started telling stories about the constellations to the younger children during the day, sketching them in the dirt with a stick, making them sound like adventures. I would lead them to the edge of the meadow in the evenings, not with grand plans, but just to sit and watch the sky together. I remember one particular evening, weeks into my summer. I was sitting on the porch swing with Grandma, and the sky was exceptionally clear. The Milky Way was a dazzling spectacle, and countless stars twinkled like a million tiny diamonds scattered across black velvet. Mr. Henderson and Mrs. Gable were sitting on their own porches, their lights off. I could see them silhouetted against the faint glow of the stars. I pulled out my star chart, not to explain constellations to anyone, but just to trace familiar patterns. I found Orion, his belt now clearly visible, his sword hanging below. I found Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, a brilliant beacon. They weren't forgotten anymore. They were shining, vibrant and alive for everyone to see. The change was slow, like the gradual turning of the seasons. It wasn't a sudden miracle, but a gentle, persistent awakening. People in the village started to talk about the stars. They'd ask each other, "Did you see that shooting star last night?" Or, "The moon looks so much softer without all the bright lights." My summer goal wasn't just about seeing brighter stars. It was about seeing people connect again, to something bigger than themselves, to the vast, silent wonder of the universe above. It was about remembering the stories that had guided our ancestors, the beauty that had inspired poets and dreamers for millennia. It was about proving that even a 10-year-old boy with a simple love for the sky could make a difference, one forgotten star at a time. The quiet countryside was still quiet, but now it was filled with a different kind of peace, the peace of a sky rediscovered, and a community reminded of its place beneath the vast, starlit heavens. The whispers of wonder began to ripple through the village, carried on the evening breeze. It started subtly, a few more lights off on porches, a brief pause in conversations to gaze upwards. Then it grew, gaining momentum like a gentle tide. Grandma's stories, my own earnest explanations, and the sheer, undeniable magic of a clear, dark sky began to weave themselves into the fabric of our small community. One afternoon, I found myself sitting on the porch swing, the familiar creak, a comforting rhythm, rereading my well-worn star chart. I traced the outline of Orion with my finger, remembering how faint he'd been just weeks ago. Now, his 3-star belt was a proud, unmistakable line across the darkening sky. Regulus, the lion's head, gleamed with a brilliance that made my heart swell. It wasn't just the stars that had changed. The way I saw them had changed too. I no longer saw just dots of light. I saw ancient narratives, celestial journeys, and a profound, silent conversation happening above our heads every night. The dark sky hour had become a weekly event. It wasn't just a designated time anymore. It was a ritual. People started to anticipate it, preparing for it. Mrs. Gable would bring out thermoses of hot chocolate. Mr. Henderson would share his prized telescope. And the younger children, armed with my clumsy drawings of constellations, would point and exclaim with delight. Even Mr. Peterson, the once skeptical store owner, had started leaving his shop lights off after closing, claiming he liked the peace and quiet the darkness brought. One evening, as we sat in the meadow, the Milky Way, a breathtaking river of light overhead, a young girl named Lily, no older than 7, tugged on my sleeve. Her eyes, wide and full of awe, were fixed on the sky. "Sam," she whispered, "why does it look like the sky is made of glitter?" Quote, I smiled. "That's the Milky Way, Lily. It's made of billions and billions of stars, so far away they look like dust. It's like a giant pathway to other places, other worlds." Her face lit up. "Wow, can we visit them?" Quote, "Not yet," I said, "but we can visit them with our imaginations. Every star has a story, and when we look up, we can travel through those stories." This became my new approach. I realized that simply showing people the stars wasn't enough. I needed to reignite their imagination, to remind them of the wonder that had been dimmed by the city's artificial glow. I started leaving my star chart open on Grandma's porch, with notebooks and pencils for anyone who wanted to sketch what they saw, or write down their own starry tales. The stories I'd shared, of Orion the hunter, of Cassiopeia the queen, of Andromeda the princess, began to resurface in conversations around the village. Children would act out the myths in their games, their voices echoing through the fields. Adults would recall memories of looking at the stars with their own parents, their eyes softening with nostalgia. The forgotten stars were being remembered, not just by me, but by everyone. One crisp autumn evening, as the air began to carry a hint of frost, the village decided to host a star festival. It wasn't a grand, commercial event, but a gathering of our own making. We set up lanterns along the path leading to the meadow, their soft glow a deliberate contrast to the harsh glare of streetlights. Grandma baked her famous apple pies, their aroma mingling with the scent of dry leaves. Mr. Henderson brought out his telescope, and the children, with my guidance, had created a small constellation corner where they presented their drawings and stories. I was asked to say a few words. Standing before the assembled villagers, my heart thrummed with a mixture of nervousness and pride. I looked at their faces, illuminated by the lantern light and the faint shimmer of the stars, and I saw a profound change. These were the same people who had once seen the night sky as merely an absence of light. Now they saw it as a vibrant, living entity, a source of wonder and connection. When I first came here, I began, my voice clear and steady. The stars seemed so far away, so faint. It felt like they were forgotten. But Grandma told me it wasn't the stars, it was us. We had forgotten how to look. And tonight, I gestured upwards to the dazzling expanse above. We haven't just remembered how to look, we've remembered how to see. We've remembered the stories, the beauty, the sheer magic that's always been there, waiting for us. I spoke about the importance of darkness, not as an absence, but as a canvas. I talked about the way the stars had guided our ancestors, how they had inspired art and science. I reminded them that in the vastness of the universe, we were all connected, a small but significant part of something immense and beautiful. As I finished, a spontaneous round of applause erupted. It wasn't the polite clapping of a formal gathering, but a warm, heartfelt expression of shared joy. People were hugging, smiling, their faces radiant with a rediscovered sense of wonder. The summer was drawing to a close. My departure was approaching, and a bittersweet feeling settled in my chest. I had come here, a city boy, accustomed to noise and artificial light, feeling a pang of disappointment at the faintness of the stars. I was leaving with a heart full of starlight, a mind brimming with stories, and a deep appreciation for the quiet magic of the night sky. On my last evening, I sat on the porch swing with Grandma, the familiar creak now a farewell melody. The sky was a masterpiece of celestial artistry. The Big Dipper was sharp and clear, its handle pointing towards Polaris, a steady beacon. Orion, the hunter, stood sentinel, his belt a proud line of 3 stars. Even the faint whispers of distant galaxies seemed to be amplified in the profound stillness. "You did good, Sam," Grandma said, her voice soft as a sigh. She reached out and gently squeezed my hand. You reminded them of the sky." "It wasn't just me, Grandma," I replied, my gaze fixed on the celestial tapestry. "It was all of us. We all looked up, and the stars remembered how to shine." As I prepared to leave the next morning, the village felt different. The quiet was no longer just an absence of sound. It was a presence, a sense of peace that had settled deep within the land and its people. The fields, once just green expanses, now seemed to hold the memory of the starlit nights. The old oak trees, their leaves rustling in the morning breeze, seemed to whisper secrets of the cosmos. I carried with me more than just memories of apple pies and gentle conversations. I carried the echoes of gasps of awe, the laughter of children pointing at shooting stars, and the quiet murmur of adults sharing stories under the vast, dark sky. I had come to a place where stars had been forgotten, and I was leaving a place where they had been rediscovered, not just as distant lights, but as vibrant, living tales that connected us all. The summer of forgotten stars had become the summer of remembered wonders, and I knew, with a certainty as bright as any star, that the magic I had helped to ignite would continue to burn long after I had gone. The quiet here, I realized, was the sound of the universe breathing, and I had learned to listen.